The Madman! Welcome to Trump Reviews Witchwood Edition. And welcome to Trump Reviews Witchwood Edition. And welcome to Trump Reviews Witchwood Edition. I'm only going to be Trump reviewing anything that wasn't a rating of 1 last time and a 1 this time. For Druid of the Scythe, I just think that both forms are pretty bad. I don't see it happening, so 1 star. Probably is one of the weaker cards in the current Spiteful Summoner deck, but Spiteful Summoner is a tier 1 deck, so this does get a 5-star rating. I think coming up with the Spiteful Summoner nerf, Spiteful Summoner Druid will fall from tier 1 down to tier 2. My future rating for Druid of the Scythe is 4 stars. So, big picture overview. It was uncertain what types of decks would rise after the nerfs. All I thought that it was going to be very diverse, and indeed it was, but it ended up being diverse in ways that nobody could have predicted. It's almost like it was an entirely new expansion. Druid of the Scythe, it turns out that Spiteful Druid, it was no longer good once it got nerfed by 1 mana. Wow, 1 mana change to 1 card really killed the deck. So even though now it's like fallen to tier 4, Druid of the Scythe is a 2-star card due to Spiteful's very unsuccessful run. Witching Hour is a really interesting card. It is too difficult to get the exact minion, the exact beast that you want to resummon with Witching Hour, I think. I couldn't get it to work. 1 star. I knew it could summon Hadronox, but I also knew you couldn't put Spreading Plague and Malfurion into your deck, and I thought that would be enough to not make it good. But it turned out that Taunt Druid made some waves, although it then disappeared shortly after. It's a little bit of a stretch to call Taunt Druid a tier 3 deck, but I'm going to call it that. So Witching Hour is going to be a 4-star card as a card that defines this Taunt Druid deck. So I'm a little torn on whether or not to rate it 3 or 4 stars, on whether or not I think it'll end up being a tier 3 or tier 4 deck. But I'm going to rate it 4 stars in the future since I think it'll barely make it to be a tier 3 deck. So you might think, whoa, I saw this Witching Hour Taunt Druid deck all the time. It's definitely at least tier 2, and indeed, I do have it in my tier 2 rating list, and as Witching Hour defines that deck, I'm going to give it 5 stars. But I will also add that Taunt Druid is on the decline and is arguably falling to tier 3 as we speak, as well as in the following weeks. Wouldn't be surprised if it did, but it was outclassed, replaced by just Big Druid, because being able to run Spreading Plague and Malfurion in your deck is really good after all. Ferocious Howl! So I think all of these Big Druid cards actually live together and die together, so I'm rating this a 3 star as well, since I'm pegging the Hand Druid deck at tier 3. So this ends up being a 3-star card for a slightly different reason. It's because Taunt Druid often ran Ferocious Howl, and that's a tier 3 deck, so 3-star card. I think in the future this will also be a 3-star card. Surprise! A completely new deck came out after the changes because of the slower meta, because a bunch of cards were, slowed down by 1 mana, and it became a more control-focused meta. Druid came all over the place. They would run Ferocious Howl in order to just gain that armor and to cycle, kind of similar to Shield Block, and due to the prevalence of that card, as well as Malygos Druid being a tier 1 deck and running 2 copies of Ferocious Howl, it's actually a 5-star card. Whispering Woods. Alongside all of these Hand Druid cards, I think Whispering Woods is a really good addition. It'll commonly be summoning 7 Wisps on turn 4. Well, Hand Druid never ended up being a thing, but the particular cards that reward cards in your hand, turns out Ferocious Howl went to Taunt Druid and Whispering Woods went to Token Druid. Token Druid not a major force in the meta, therefore I'll give it a 2-star rating. In the future, I think Token Druid is going to be a fringe deck still, even with all the nerfs. I still think it's weaker than all the other aggressive decks, so I'm going to once again say 2 stars. Token Druid evolved in a way that pretty much nobody expected. So Token Druid exists, but not in the form that you think it does. It's not an aggressive deck anymore, it's just a sticky deck. You get your cards out with Whispering Woods or with Spreading Plague, and then you solve the forest them, and they stay on the board because it's very hard to remove both waves. And because of the slowdown of the meta, this actually became a tier 1 deck, so Whispering Woods, 5-star card in a surprise showing. Ratchap, it's basically 2 mana do nothing a lot of the time because it can be easily played around if it ever comes into the meta. So 2 mana, do nothing, I don't like it. 1 star. Yep, 1 star. Even though Secret Hunter and Spell Hunter was a thing. This just doesn't make the cut. Shockingly, there was a moment in which Rat Trap, and I made a video on this, I proclaimed Rat Trap as the highest win percentage card in Secret Hunter, which was doing very well for a time period. And Rat Trap still makes its way into Secret Hunter as a one-of sometimes, but it has since been on decline. So at the end of the day, since Spell Hunter is a tier 2 deck, and Rat Trap is a card that is sometimes in that deck, Rat Trap gets a 3-star rating, and is perhaps one of the larger surprises of the set, for me personally. Houndmaster Shaw is clearly really powerful. That said, I could not really build a deck that I thought was going to be that powerful. So I rate Shaw a 3-star card. So the only Hunter deck that ended up being actually viable was Spell Hunter, and unfortunately Houndmaster Shaw is not a spell. 1 star, even though on paper he seems really strong. At the moment of this review, this sort of recruit hunter was nowhere on the radar, but the slowdown in the meta enabled so many decks to rise, including a Death Rattle hunter, a recruit hunter, whichever you will call it. There were actually 2 main schools of thought, recruit hunter with or without cube, focusing more or less on death rattles. But Houndmaster Shaw was in them, and recruit hunter was a tier 2 deck, and Houndmaster Shaw was a good inclusion in the deck, so Shaw, 4 stars. Blast. Similar to Shaw, this is going to be a very good card in mid-range hunter. 1 mana, deal 4, yes please. This could also be a great spell for Spell Hunter. I think it will see play there. I'm going to rate this a 4-star card. So Wing Blast ended up being a 3-star card, as a card that sometimes saw play in the tier 2 deck of Spell Hunter. I think Spell Hunter could actually rise to be a tier 1 deck, and I think Wing Blast will continue to sometimes see play in that deck. But actually, I will give the original rating again, 4 stars. This card is a big example of why I use my rating scale, because Wing Blast does seem like a good card, right? 1 mana, deal 4, but all cards are only as good as the meta they're in. None of us really could have seen the meta as being as big of a control meta. This is the largest control meta we've ever seen. So for once, if you predicted a control meta for the second half of the Witchwood, you would actually be right. And it turns out that if the meta is control, then dealing damage to minions is not very important. And because of that, Wing Blast fell in popularity in Spell Hunter. Or Spell Hunter also not quite making it to tier 1 like I thought, but instead the bottom of tier 2. And even in that, the Spell Hunter does not run Wing Blast very often. So Wing Blast gets 2 stars. Dire Frenzy is a really interesting card, but all in all, I found this to be too much work. In this case, I think they're going to try it out and find it doesn't work so quickly that they're just gonna drop it, so 1 star. I was wrong about how fast people would drop this card. The card sucks, and it's absolutely terrible, but it had at least at some point during the period I was looking at, saw 1% of inclusion in deck, so therefore this is a 2-star card. In the future, I predicted it'll be a 1-star card, since yet another surprise. Dire Frenzy, I think anyone who actually plays Hearthstone at a, mid or even low to high tier in Constructed will realize that Dire Frenzy isn't actually played and is actually just really bad. But to my surprise, when I glanced over at HSReplay's card played statistics, Dire Frenzy is just this card that is a fan favorite, and it's terrible, but I mean, across the entire population, Dire Frenzy is being played at least 1% even now. I don't know who's playing this deck. I don't know what deck it's being played as. I can only imagine that people look at it as like Blessing of Kings, except you get an additional +9/+9 in the future. Wow. It's 2 stars based on how widely it's played, but the card is very bad. Archmage Arugul. 2 mana, 2/2, with a really powerful ability. If it's on the board, your opponent must kill it, otherwise you get so much value off of it. So therefore, I should rate Arugul 4 stars before moving on. This one is barely going to enter the 2-star category. Did see nearly the 1% of play. Never really caught on because the other decks were more popular. Interestingly enough, Murloc Mage still remains a force to this day. A minor force, but a force nonetheless. However, what it has cut is Archmage Aragorn. Archmage Aragorn almost makes it to 2 stars, but falls a bit short and is 1 star. Because you don't, in fact, need to play Archmage Aragorn with the card that does enable Murloc Mage, which is because the other decks were more popular. Where Aragorn really shines is with Book of Spectres. Draw 3 cards for 2 mana. Holy cow, we have never seen anything that good before. 4 stars, Book of Spectres. Where is Book of Spectres and Aragorn going to be run? It's going to be run in some sort of minion-heavy mage, possibly elemental mage, and then quite potentially other mages as well. And it turned out other mage ended up being Murloc Mage. So, yep, Book of Spectres ends up being 2 stars, and I still think it'll be 2 stars in the future. The fact that Murloc Mage, when Mage has no Murloc cards, and the Murloc cards generally are pretty terrible, has some amount of play, goes to show you that these 2 cards, once like better neutral minions or better mage minions come out, this could really be a thing, Zoo Mage. Murloc Mage ended up actually being a decent force, worthy of being called tier 3, and Book of Spectres does make it happen, so I'm upgrading this rating to 3 stars. Cinderstorm. It's arcane missiles with +2 missiles for +2 mana. Boy, is that a bad deal. 1 star. I thought it was a bad deal, but it turns out to be a pretty good deal. In a world where Avenging Wrath somehow got played, which was +3 mana for +3 more missiles, I guess Cinderstorm suddenly looked pretty fair. So I'm going to give Cinderstorm a 5-star rating this time around, as a card that sees play in nearly every single Tempo Mage. So since Odd Paladin might start to see a rise in play, Cinderstorm should still be just as good, if not better. Odd Paladin ended up still being a major force in the meta, so Cinderstorm was still good in that deck, and Cinderstorm was run at 2 of. However, what was hurt is that Tempo Mage did decline into a tier 3 deck, mostly because all the defensive decks out there, especially all the druids, gained a lot of armor. And boy do Tempo Mages hate when people gain armor, because their spells deal damage to the face, and armor gain is very efficient against spell damage. Cinderstorm ends up getting a 3-star. Arcane Keysmith has a lot of versatility in that you discover secrets. Looks like it go into a variety of mage decks, and for that reason I'm going to give it 3 stars, but I don't really see where it goes, to be honest. I was a little bit surprised that it actually ended up going to Big Spell Mage, but because it's commonly in Big Spell Mage, a tier 3 deck, Arcane Keysmith does get the 3-star rating, as well as very occasionally being in Tempo Mage. With some of the other decks shifting around in power level, I think Big Spell Mage will actually rise to tier 2 status. So I'm going to improve Arcane Keysmith's star rating up to 4 stars. And this is a big surprise, because this is the first card that I've actually rated correctly. Yes, 4 stars, yes, Big Spell Mage got to tier 2, but it goes to show how much that the nerfs changed. Bonfire Elemental! I theory crafted up a Bonfire Elemental deck, an Elemental deck I mean, for Mage, and I think it's about tier 3, so I rate Bonfire Elemental 3 stars. Bonfire Elemental saw enough play to get a 2-star rating, but Elemental Mage seems to not be that good. Probably still will be less good than a bunch of the value mages out there, so 1 star in the future. I'm starting to realize that when I look at the played rating of cards, that sometimes surprises come up, even though they're not competitive. Player base is large enough, and probably enough of a player base likes playing offbeat or maybe budget decks, that Bonfire Elemental is still 2 stars. It sees at least 1% of plays at some point over the last period of time where the Witchwood was out, and it's just a good budget card. It's a decent card. Gaining a little bit of resurgence in popularity due to Mountain Giant becoming an elemental. Bonfire Elemental keys off of Mountain Giant, though the 2-star rating was even before that change, which means that didn't really affect this rating, though it's recently getting a bit more popular due to tribal changes. And finally, Toki, Time Tinker. Clearly meant for some sort of grinder mage, some sort of control mage, but for those decks I consider Elise better, and even Cindergosa should be better. So Toki, 1 star for you. Well, not only because of cuteness value, but actually because it's a legitimate option for a big spell mage. She saw enough play to get 2 stars. And I think in the future, she will also see just enough play to be in the 2-star category. Unfortunately, Toki's cuteness did not win out this time. The random legendary minion ended up being less good than some of the other tech options you could put into Big Spell Mage, so Toki lost popularity in that slot, and became a 1-star card. The Glass Knight is a card that I can see put into many different Paladin decks. With Rallying Blade rotating out, it seems like we're going to revert back to the good old True Silver Champion as our weapon of choice, and even with only that weapon restoring health, I think the Glass Knight is going to see play across a lot of different Paladin decks. I'm rating this a 5-star card. I think that a 4-mana 4/3 Divine Shield is just a strong stat line, even if you don't restore any health. When you have Kings, and you have True Silver, and you have Call to Arms, Glass Knight just might be a little bit too much to put in your deck. It was a 2-star card. Now that said, with Call to Arms getting nerfed, 4-slot opens up a little bit, and between Murloc Paladin, maybe some sort of other mid-range Paladin, I still think that Glass Knight could see some play. So I was torn a little bit to rate it either 2 or 3 stars in the future. I'm going to rate it 2 stars in the future. Almost! And perhaps in a slightly different world, in which more streamers streamed even Paladin, then maybe that would be true. Because even Paladin ends up having a decent win rate. I've heard some reports of it hitting very high, maybe even #1 legend, and Glass Knight is in a few of those builds. But we are in a reality, however, that even Paladin and Murloc Paladin are underplayed for their win rate. So it's a 1-star card, but I still submit that it is a card to look out for. Also, this is the only card from Paladin that we are actually looking at, and I ended up rating it 1 star. Squashling. It's the Echo Voodoo Doctor. I don't think it's gonna work out. 1 star. To my surprise, this ended up being the best Echo card in the set. So Squashling is a tech option in Control Priest. I feel like Control Priest will be a tier 1 deck in the future, and I think Squashling will continue to be a tech option for it. Some people will run it, some people won't. So 3 stars now, 3 stars in the future. Or Squashling has gotten teched out of these Control Priests, and even though Control Priest is still a tier 2 deck, Squashling just doesn't get to see any play in it. And my hypothesis is due to the lower amount of aggro, you don't need a card whose main purpose is to restore health. Poor guy is back to being 1 star. Divine Hymn. This card I know actually got a decent amount of hype, but I compare it with Circle of Healing, which costs 0, Binding Heal, which is still in, that doesn't really see play, so I look at Divine Hymn and I make a call that this is a 1-star card. Well, big shock to me, this ends up being a 5-star card and a staple in Control Priest. I guess the 6 health that you heal to yourself was just a big enough deal that I didn't realize. Control Priest ended up being a tier 1 deck, and I think it'll still be a tier 1 deck in the future, so 5 stars in the future also. So let's take a trip down memory lane and remember the nerfs. They were Call to Arms, so even Paladin got hit, Dark Pact and Possessed Lackey nerfing Q block, and they were the Quest nerfing Quest Rogue, and they were the Spiteful, nerfing Spiteful Druid. And through all of those changes, it just turned out that the meta turned much more control. Control Priest was a deck that was very good against aggro decks, and there weren't that many left. So Control Priest, even though it looked like a tier 1 deck alongside all of the other decks I mentioned, ended up falling just naturally. So excellent call by Blizzard not nerfing any Control Priest cards, even though many players were skeptical at what would happen during a domination reign of Control Priest. Control Priest ends up being tier 2, and Divine Hymn therefore 4 stars. Cutthroat Buccaneer. Well, for those of you who still want to play with your Kingsbane deck, this replaces Naga Corsair. For that reason, I guess I'll give it a 2-star rating, even though I think Kingsbane is a pretty bad deck. I actually entirely forgot that Kingsbane decks existed. 1 star, seems like everyone else also forgot. And when the meta slowed down a lot, Kingsbane decks came back, and Cutthroat Buccaneer was in that deck. And it's kind of a surprise that even though we're in one of the most control-heavy metas of all time, that Kingsbane isn't doing well. And the reason for that is, Kingsbane is a riskier deck to play than Shudderwock, and Shudderwock is a deck that beats control decks if you get to the late game, so why would you go through the Kingsbane middleman? That said though, if Shudderwock weren't around, Kingsbane would probably be the number 2 to fall back to, and Kingsbane does still have its diehard fans. Buccaneer saw enough play to make it to 2 stars. Blink Fox. Really efficient card. 3 mana, 3/3 doesn't lose you card advantage. 5 stars. This is part of the equation that makes Tempo Rogue viable, I'd say. So the Tempo Rogue deck that ended up coming up was actually a faster version of the deck than I thought, and it's called Odd Rogue. And Blinkfox is conveniently odd and a good card. And as Blinkfox is in Odd Rogue, which is a tier 2 deck, Blinkfox ends up being a 4-star card. They also predicted that this would be a 5-star card, and it did end up being a 5-star card, since Odd Rogue is a tier 1 deck, and Blinkfox is a good card in that deck. Zap. I think it's a pretty good card, but it's tough to fit into the specific Shaman deck that I think will be good. So anyways, at the end of the day, I'm rating it 3 stars. So 2 stars. It's awesome play in Even Shaman, it's awesome play in Shudderwalk, but not really enough play to give it the 3-star rating, even though it's in 2 decks. Zap ends up falling even further to 1 star because meta changed more control. You don't actually need this creature removal. Shudderwalk decks therefore grew more refined and did not use Zap anymore, preferring instead for more specific answers such as Earthshock or bigger answers such as Lightning Bolt. Darkeel! If you want to give yourself a headache, you can try to build an even cost Shaman deck. I don't recommend it. 1 star. Oh, this is the one I missed on. You can build an even cost Shaman deck. Now, to be fair, the even cost Shaman deck ends up being, like, at best tier 2 in the past meta. But, hey, this deck, this card does define that deck, so it's actually 5 stars. Yes, it is still 5 stars. And even Shaman is either very high tier 2 or low tier 1. Frozen Might, 2 stars. Card itself seems strong, but the Elemental Shaman deck currently is weak. And Kelesteth is actually better for it. So Earthen Might is a card that is run somewhere between sometimes and most of the time in Even Shaman. Enough that I'll call it a 3-star card. I think in the future, as Even Shaman is predicted by me to become a tier 1 deck, Earthen Might will still be run in some of them, and probably enough that it's not just going to be a tech card and put it at 3 stars, so Earthen Might, future 4 stars. Pretty much almost right? So Earthen Might is run in pretty much all Shamans, and Shamans of the Even variety are tier 2, so Earthen Might gets a 4-star rating. Hagatha the Witch. Given her hero power, you certainly want to play it in a deck with a lot of minions, so it seems like a natural fit for Elemental Shaman. I did, in fact, put her in Elemental Shaman. Elemental Shaman I find to be a tier 4 deck. I'm putting Hagatha the Witch still at 3 stars, just because she's really good in that deck. But also because I think she has some potential in this Shudderwalk deck. So, turns out to be making the cut in the Shudderwalk deck. But not just that, she's an Even Shaman. I'd say she's somewhere in between defining an Even Shaman and is really good. If I round in the fact that she's even in Shudderwalk Shaman, I guess we can, in fact, push her up to 5 stars. Ben Road, you were right! It's too OP! It's too OP! My god, it's so OP, 5 stars! Excellent card in Even Shaman as well as Shudderwalk. And finally, Shudderwalk. Big game changer for Shaman. The way that a Shaman deck actually makes it to tier 1 again. So whew, that was quite a mouthful, but needless to say, I think that Shudderwalk will be 5 stars. Well, I mean, he was certainly extremely popular, which is exactly what you want on a card like this. So good job, Shudderwalk. You have established yourself in our hearts, and you required a change in Hearthstone to limit the amount of battle cries and speed up the animation. The Shudderwalk, I'm going to say, is like a tier 4 deck. If you were being really generous, it'd be tier 3, but I think it would be too generous, so we're calling it tier 4. And it certainly defines that deck, so we'll add a star onto it. So 3-star card for Shudderwalk. 3 in the future, I guess, as I think it continues to be in a position where all the fast decks just roll over it, and it's not quite as able to beat the fast decks as Quest Rogue was. Here's the big benefit of the meta changing. The guy who was lurking in the darkness with its claws that snatch and its jaws that bite. Shudderwalk ends up thriving in a control meta because it feasts on all the control decks. You get late enough and you literally just win if you play Shudderwalk. Shudderwock does not have a over 50% win rate when combined in aggregate across everyone playing, but it is a very big mainstay in tournaments and is a very skill-intensive deck, which explains the low low win rate similar to Grim Patron. So it being under a 50% win rate is deceptive. It's actually a major force in shaping the meta, and top players are hitting top legend with it and going ridiculous streaks with Shudderwock. Shudderwock, you have earned a tier 1 spot, and you are actually a problem card, which I'm looking forward to seeing how Blizzard will address later on. Still weak to aggro decks, but you actually can just put in so many anti-aggro cards into Shudderwock because you just beat control anyways. I think that this card might actually get nerfed in the future. 5 stars. That's bad. I think that Zoo should run this card, and I'm rating it 3 stars because I think Zoo is going to be about tier 3. So Zoo does end up being a tier 3 deck, weak tier 3, but tier 3 nonetheless. And Duskbat was in the version that I played it in, but I understand that it's not actually in every single Zoo deck, so I'm going to say Duskbat is a 2-star card. In the future, I think Zoo will probably be getting a bump up to tier 2, perhaps. So Duskbat will be in some of those decks as well, so I'm going to say it's the 3-star card then. Zoo has gotten a last-minute bump up to tier 1, and that's because of the vision of Healing Zoo. Duskbat does not play a part of that vision, and it was not really that big a part of Zoo anyways, so ends up being 1 star. Better cards were found for Zoo, but did anyone have the vision to see that the better cards were going to be Happy Ghoul and Light Warden and Voodoo Doctor? Twin the Crowskin, I think, is a pretty good late game Zoo drop. Play it, and if you survive a turn, you can get a ridiculous amount of value by recasting any of your 1-cost cards for tremendous value. Try not to kill yourself with the Flame Imp though. So 3 stars is, I think, Zoo is a tier 3 deck. You know, I never actually got around to running a Glinda Warlock deck, but I've heard that this is actually a fringe deck out there. It did see enough play to warrant a 2-star. It is fringe. Glinda Crowskin is kind of a design limiter on mechs and magnetic coming up, so 1 star. Just fell off popularity, didn't get experimented with this later half. And finally, Lord Godfrey. Often will just be a 7-mana 4/4 with a Twisting Nether effect that comes along with it that kills everything except Godfrey. 5 stars, run in your Cube Block deck, run in your Control Warlock deck. Yep, do that. 5 stars. Continue doing that. 5 stars in the future. Yeah, continue doing that. Even though Cube Block is a tier 2 deck, we're making an exception for Lord Godfrey as it is a standout power card in that deck, and is clearly going to be very strong in control type warlocks for times to come. Lord Godfrey still gets a 5-star rating. At the end of the day, when I was building my warrior decks, I put in the rush package, and the rush package was looking pretty good. It didn't have anything else in it. So right now, Warriors got the problem where the rush package seems good, but there's nowhere to insert it into. For that reason, even though Town Crier is an amazing card, which I would normally rate 5 stars if Warrior had a viable deck, I'm gonna have to rate 3 stars for now. Yeah, that's pretty much the sadness of Town Crier. Rush Warrior ends up being awful. However, a new champion arrived, and it's called Control Warrior. Control Warrior does commonly run Town Crier with a package of Rabid Worgen and Darius Crowley. Town Crier is in that deck, and therefore 4 stars. Town Crier was looking like it could be the tier 2 deck, which would, after the nerf, become like a tier 2 again, or even a tier 1 deck. But no! The reason for this is because late game control decks all die to Shudderwock. Doesn't matter how much armor you have, and having your Baku improve your hero power to tank up is really awesome, but when Shudderwock deals 60 damage to you in 1 shot and heals back to full, maybe you survive the 60 damage, but then they're just going to deal 60 damage to you the next turn also and still be at full. The Town Crier and the Rush package completely collapsed, and Control Warrior is no more due to the claws that grab and the jaws that eat. So Town Crier ends up being 1 star. Warpath certainly seems like a great card for the Control Warrior. Will there be a Control Warrior this time around? With Sleep with the Fishes rotating out, I'm not entirely sure. So Warpath I'm rating a 2-star card just because I don't think Control Warrior is going to see play. So Warpath is an interesting spot where the best Control Warrior deck is arguably the odd one with the tank up, and Warpath unfortunately can't be played in that one. So therefore, 3 stars on this deck. Given how good this card is, I guess I will optimistically raise its rating from the 3 stars that it's currently in to 4 stars. Based on my ratings, I thought that both the Odd Warrior with tank up and the Taunt Warrior would succeed, and possibly even somewhere in between, a Control Warrior which just ran Warpath, which wasn't Taunt. The only one that actually ended up succeeding was the Taunt Warrior, and Warpath is in that deck. It's an excellent board clear for the Taunt Warrior, and Taunt Warrior is tier 2, so Warpath does get up to a 4-star rating after all. Rabid Worgen. I found that one of the problems with the Tempo Warrior deck is it's lacking 1-drops, 2-drops, and 3-drops. So while normally Rabid Worgen would probably be a 1-star card just because of the severe lack of 3-drops, I'm gonna give this a 2-star. Rabid Worgen ends up being a pretty big surprise because it's just very vanilla and very meh stats, but because Town Crier is good and because Odd Warrior needs the cards, Rabid Worgen is in it. 4 stars. And just like Town Crier, Rabid Worgen takes a massive fall into Unplayed due to Shutterwalk dealing who cares about how much armor you have. 1-star Rabid Worgen. Darius Crowley. Clear 5-star card, but no real deck that can support him at the moment. Interestingly enough, I actually think he might be good enough to fit into the Taunt Odd Warrior deck. So for that reason, I'm boosting this guy up to a 4-star card. I'd say Darius Crowley is on the edge of a 4 or 5-star. I kind of want to separate it from Rabid Worgen, which I rated a 4-star. And Darius Crowley and Rabid Worgen being on the same level is like, but we'll end up putting him at 4 stars also. I think on looking at this ends up being pretty much right because Rabid Worgen, Darius Crowley, Town Crier, they're a package. You rate them the same stars. I rated all of them 4, and this time they're all 1s because of that monster that lurks in the shadow. Baku the Moon Eater. We didn't know if even odd was going to be a thing, and I think that the tier 1 deck that will be spawned off of this is Baku Hunter. Base Hunter being able to deal 3 damage from the get-go with their hero power instead of 2. Taunt Warrior, all odd, doesn't lose that much, and you get the tank up from turn 1. It seems like it'll let you survive until you complete the quest. Odd Mage, looks like it can generate ridiculous amounts of value with 2 mana, deal 2 damage. I think Baku is going to have a huge impact. 5 stars. You know those times where you get the reason completely wrong, but you're still right in the end? That's one of these things. So, 5 stars. Defines Odd Warrior. Odd Paladin is a deck. Odd Rogue, that's the big one I missed. So, yeah, fantastic card. If there's one thing that Witchwood is going to be remembered for, it's going to be for Baku, and it's going to be for Gen. Thank goodness for those 2 cards, otherwise this expansion probably would not have been as memorable at all. But needless to say, Baku the Moon Eater, 5 stars, and I predicted that it would be the #1 card of the set, and I think, for once, that is actually correct. Azalina Soul Thief, hailed by many initially as a neutral Divine Favor. Divine Favor turns out to be pretty bad at 7 mana, 1 star. So I never would have imagined that this card is actually the card that you put into Control Warrior as a way to kind of finish your opponent or to refuel. Like, that sounds so wrong on a lot of different levels, but it's what happened. So, 3 stars? Things got weird. Things got even weirder. No mortal could have predicted it. But the amount of weirdness that happened once the game slowed down enough was incredible. Azalina Soul Thief is no longer played in Control Warrior since that died due to Shutterwalk, but instead it is played in Togwoggle Druid. That's how slow the meta got, and that's how good the Druid core cards are. Azalina Soul Thief ends up being 3 stars. Genna Greenmane. Well, he's no Baku, but I still did look at every single class that could use Gen, and the 2 most likely that I see are Paladin and Warlock. Paladin looks like a fair deck, which means it's probably not going to be great. Warlock looks like it's going to be some sort of handlock type deck, and I feel like it performs worse than Cube Block. That said, there's a lot of possibilities out there for him, and if he makes it into multiple tier 4 decks, then I think this rating is accurate. 3 stars. Oh, you were so close! So, I did humor the idea of Gen Greymane in Paladin, but what I failed to do was consider the Amani Berserker tech, and like the Dry Gulch Jeller and whatnot. It's like, you needed the breakthrough of adding Amani Berserker into your deck, to be honest. So, ends up being 5 stars. Call to Armsing all of your 2-cost minions ends up being really good. And this deck will collapse once Call to Arms is 5 mana. But again, Greymane will still be good because of Even Shaman. And also Evenlock, which didn't quite come up because Evenlock was nowhere... It was minor on the radar, just because Q-Block had been overshadowing it for so long. But once the Lackey and the Dark Pact had gotten nerfed, Evenlock ended up taking over the helm. And Gen Greymane is in fact 5 stars for both Evenlock as well as Even Shaman. Mossy Horror is going to be a decent tech card that you'll pull out if there happens to be a lot of minions with 2 or less attack. I could see it as a one of in quite a few decks. Tech card, which I will label as 3 stars. So Mossy Horror actually did pretty much exactly as expected. It's a tech card, mostly druid type decks and control-ish decks. So 3 stars now. I'll even say 3 in the future as well. Mossy Horrors is in fact serving the same purpose even now, and is a excellent tech card at 3 stars. Has seen play across Evenlock, Shudderwalk, Warlock. Rotten Apple Bomb. In the world of aggro that is about to befall us, I think Rotten Apple Bomb stands as the bastion of control to toss a speed bump in their way. And I think this is a decent speed bump. I'm gonna rate this 5 stars. 4 stars for Rotten Apple Bomb. A card that I wouldn't even call a tech card, just a card that you... no, I guess it's a tech card. But it is a basic card that you put into a number of decks sometimes, but not consistently in enough of them to be 5 stars. Well said. Rotten Apple Bomb still maintains that role, where it is a good tech card, commonly seen, but not really a consistent 2 of in any deck. Just a really excellent tech card, of which deserves its 4-star rating. Witchwood Grizzly is also a good anti-aggro tool. At the end of the day, I'm not actually sure which one wins out over the other. They both have advantages and disadvantages over the other, but Grizzly, I also rate 5 stars. So I wasn't sure about which one would actually be the choice, and Witchwood Grizzly probably wasn't the choice just because Cube Block Control Lock had a lot of cards in their hand. And I knew that going in, but I thought that there would be enough of the other decks out there. So Witchwood Grizzly is a 2-star card. Didn't see nearly enough tech prevalence as much as Rotten Apple Bomb. Witchwood Grizzly gets a major bump up to 4 stars because of its inclusion in Recruit Hunter. When you're recruiting a beast from your deck, it turns out that a 3/12 taunt is very good when you don't have the negative battle cry of it. So not used as a tech card at all, but just used as pulling a big 3/12 taunt from your deck. Life Drinker! I feel like this is the combo card that will kill your opponent as your Shudderwalk deck, and therefore when this guy tags along with what I'm pegging as a tier 1 upcoming deck of the Shudderwalk combo deck, the Life Drinker will be 5 stars. So this card is 4 stars now, commonly run in Aggro Mage, but also in other decks, such as Shudderwalk, and it's even run in Control Priest sometimes, like the Burn Priest, where you just Holy Fire, Life Shrink, and etc. them. But in the future, I'm going to bump it up along with Tempo Mage's rating to 5 stars. The original Trump had it right all along. 5 stars due to Shudderwalk, also sees major play and heals you. You life drink them, you play your Happy Ghoul, you attack for +2 with your Light Warden. Sandbinder,
the creeper.
Hitch your wagon onto the Shudderwalk train, because Sandbinder is going to be the card that makes Shudderwalk decks more consistent. So I rated this card very surprisingly number 5, I believe, in my top 10 list, and 5 stars because it gets you the combo pieces in the Shudderwalk deck. The Shudderwalk was the only reason why I gave this a 5-star rating, because I thought the Shudderwalk deck would be so insane and it would be tier 1, and Sandbinder would be in all of them. Strangely enough, Sandbinder is not even in Shudderwalk all the time now, as it became less combo oriented and more control focused. However, where Sandbinder started seeing play was in Even Shaman. It's 4 mana, 2/4, draw a good card from your deck. So, as a kind of sometimes card in the Shaman deck, we'll give it a 3-star rating now as well as in the future. I didn't even remember this Even Shaman thing running Sandbinder. I don't believe that happens anymore, but it still remains a option for Shutterwalk decks. I'd say it's about 50-50 whether or not this is in the Shutterwalk deck. So ends up being a 4-star card based off of its occasional inclusion into Shutterwalk. Scaleworm. I see this as a card that's great in Spiteful Dragon Priest. Just because I'm not entirely sure that dragons are going to be the only way that Spiteful Priest is built, I've only rated this a 4-star, which means that there is some doubt in my mind at least that maybe it actually doesn't see play. Well, in every deck that has dragons, you do see a Scaleworm. So 5 stars, and it was because of Control Priest. Since I think that Control Priest is still going to be around and still going to be tier 1, I'm going to give Scaleworm a 5-star in the future rating as well. Here's the thing about Control Priest though, it changed away from its minion focus. And it eliminated the Scaleworm. The main reason is because you weren't fighting minions as much anymore. This card fell off the truck in popularity and was only scarcely played, falling into a 2-star rating. If the meta ever gets around to needing to control minions with rush minions and with defensive cards, I expect to see Scaleworm step back up though. Witchwood Piper, I admit this is one of the ones I could be sleeping on because I do see the potential in it. There are so many decks out there which could use this to draw the lowest cost minion in their deck, but across all of them, I didn't really see much of a point in drawing the lowest cost minion as a better result than drawing a card. In the case that someone comes around and needs to draw the lowest cost minion, then Piper will actually be good, but since I didn't see one, 2 stars. One of the obvious things you might think about Piper is pulling out your Keleseth, which could be the lowest cost minion in your deck, but if it is the lowest cost minion in your deck, you're not doing the Tempo Keleseth deck right. I'm glad I mentioned that Keleseth bit. So many people have repeatedly been saying Piper Keleseth, but that's just awful. So people did find a thing for Piper to do. Drawing the lowest cost minion was useful in Control Mage, because Arcane Artificer was an important card for them. So sometimes Control Mages ran Witchwood Piper. Also good in Even Shaman, because Even Shaman cards have their trademark card on 2, the lowest card, the Eel. For that reason, it's 3 stars, and I think it'll be 3 stars in the future as a valid option, but not in all mage decks and shaman decks. Things really got weird during the second half of the Witchwood. We've never seen a meta so slow. So when I said that Piper fetching Keleseth was bad, I did not, and I doubt you did either, I did not see Shutterwalk running Keleseth in their deck, and I did not see Big Spell Mage as a legitimate option running Keleseth in their deck. My own version, which, by the way, is currently the highest win rate version, according to hsreplay, ran 2 Witchwood Piper and a Keleseth. And the main purpose of the Piper is to fetch the Arcane Artificer, but hey, if you draw the Keleseth, that's actually pretty good when you actually have so much game ahead of you. So, Witchwood Piper ends up getting a 3-star as a very valid tech option across a lot of different decks. Now, given that I actually think Big Spell Mage and Even Shaman stock are both going up, I'm gonna bump this up to 4 stars. Blackwalled Pixie could see an inclusion in the Odd Taunt Warrior quest, but I myself think that despite the stat line, despite this pushing the boundary of inclusion there, that it's not gonna quite make it. So I'm gonna rate her a 2-star card, but I'm ready to be wrong on that. Completely correct. Exactly a 2-star card. It was experimented with mostly in Odd Taunt Warrior, and then discarded. And Pixie is back! After the nerfs, Taunt Warrior got a bit of a revival, and Blackwalled Pixie saw enough play in that deck to warrant a 2-star rating. Turns out that Die Insect, Blackwalled Pixie Die Insect is very tempting for people to try. HenchClan Thug made it onto my top 10 list, and I think it's going to help carry Tempo Rogue back into the limelight. It's a 3 mana 4/4 which continues growing. 5 stars. Yep, 5 stars. It is defining of Odd Rogue. HenchClan Thug ended up being one of the best cards in the set. 5 stars. helps to carry the odd rogue as well as keeps the miracle rogue in it early, just with such a quality minion. Nightmare Amalgam. What looked to be a really flexible card in all tribes is actually a really flexible card, and it turns out that dragons, I felt like, needed this because so many of the good dragons rotated out Operative and Historian. So I feel like Spiteful Priest needs this card to serve as a dragon, and it'll see play in that. 4 stars only because I'm not entirely certain whether or not Spiteful Priest will be tier 1. Right for all the wrong reasons. Well, almost right for all the wrong reasons. The Nightmare Amalgam is always in Murloc Paladin, and Murloc Paladin is a tier 1 deck, so Nightmare Amalgam gets a 5-star rating. Murloc Paladin wasn't even on my radar when I did this first review because I thought with the 2 1-drop Murlocs rotating out, it would be dead, but it's not. Nightmare Amalgam, interesting spot. Murloc Paladin has a good win rate still, but it is just so underplayed right now for how much it wins. So Murloc Paladin should probably be called a tier 3 deck, and Nightmare Amalgam is in that deck, 3 stars. I expect this card to also see a pickup in play, depending on the quality of mechs in the next expansion. You might just need this guy to be a mech to get your Magnetize going. Anti-Militia, 4 stars. It's an excellent card to put into Odd Warrior Taunt. I think Odd Warrior Taunt is going to be a tier 2 deck. Odd Taunt Warrior did not end up being a tier 2 deck, ended up being a deck that got ousted by other decks, and I don't think it's going to be coming back. So 2 stars as it was tried out, and then 1 star in the future. But Taunt Warrior came roaring back. It's a tier 2 deck. Phantom Militia is an excellent card in that deck. 4 stars. Voodoo Doll, an interesting card that could see play across a variety of decks. Ultimately, I think maybe not in Q Block, just because Q Block is cutting the Mortal Coils. Highest probability in Warrior with the Blood Razor, and Mage with the Fire Blast. Across these variety of decks that could use it, and especially an Odd Mage, which I think is going to become a tier 2 deck. I'll rate Voodoo Doll 4 stars. Voodoo Doll not really often run in Q Block, is run in Control Lock, is run in Big Spell Mage, because you can kill it with the Fire Blast, but you can also make a Water Elemental out of it. Ends up being a 5-star card. Voodoo Doll fell off a bit because the only deck running it is Big Spell Mage, and though Big Spell Mage is a tier 2 deck, it's still not quite 5-star material, so Voodoo Doll gets 4 stars. Baleful Banker, and a surprise when I looked at the community ratings for cards, Baleful Banker was one of the higher ones. 1 star though. I just don't see this effect as being very powerful. Yeah, in normal circumstances, this card is not powerful. Baleful Banker only played specifically with Glinda. Interesting, very odd deck. So ends up being a 2-star card, and I'll say 2 in the future as it will probably continue to be fringe. I had actually never seen a Baleful Banker played at the time that I did this review, and I still haven't seen a Baleful Banker played, I believe, but I have to imagine the first time around it was just in quite enough decks because of Glinda and maybe because of Shutterwalk, but now it's a 1-star card. Vicious Scalehide is a constant thought for people to run with Countess Ashmore, but I feel like this card is so bad that even though your Countess Ashmore could count this for either the lifesteal or the rush, or even both, that you still wouldn't put this in your deck just to be able to draw it with your Countess Ashmore because, oh no, you might actually draw him. 1 star. So Vicious Scalehide actually ends up being a 5-star card, and is a reason, I was gonna say like a small reason, not even that small, and not a big reason, but it's a reason why Quest Rogue was so good. Sometimes you saw even Paladin play this card as well, like a 1-of often, to bring out with Call to Arms. However, in the future, given that Quest Rogue got a hit, and given that even Paladin will be no more, Scalehide, nonetheless, I believe will still be a 5-star card, because it's going to be an even Shaman with Corpse Taker. Wow. So yeah, Vicious Scalehide is in some of the even Shaman decks, exactly with the Corpse Taker. But there's a new school of thought as well. One that doesn't run Vicious Scalehide and still runs Corpse Taker, and there's even decks out there which don't run both. Vicious Scalehide is therefore a 3-star card as a card that sometimes shows up in even Shaman, and sometimes doesn't. Calls of Dustwood might have been right after all, but Gen and Baku certainly created a lot of different archetypes and did what Blizzard hoped to achieve. Though the neutral minions in this set were particularly disappointing. Good summation. The Witchwood is all about Baku and Gen. And of course, we can't forget...
My jaws that bite, my claws that catch.
Yuck, yuck.